Jonathan Halpern with Designing Sustainability. I'd like to tack in a slightly different direction and get your thoughts about this idea. It seems to me that many of us here are engaged in education or information transfer or trying to bring more knowledge out into the world, powerful slideshow and movies. But my sense is that it's not for lack of knowledge that we're not making the changes that we seem to say are absolutely critical and essential. But for me, it's money, in that there's a lot of money to be made in the existing way of doing things, and there's a lot of investment in existing infrastructure to keep doing things that way. And secondarily, time, and that the notion of short-term both returns, short-term thinking, short-term political terms, that makes it impossible for us to think across generations and truly in a sustainable way. So I'd be curious your thoughts on that.
Actually, to me, a wonderful example that's unfolding right now in the United States is in North Dakota, which is this new hotbed of oil drilling through fracking. And so all of a sudden we have all this new oil revenue. But also what we have is a great wind resource blowing across the state. And will we get beyond the near-term thinking of making all this money near-term and using some of that money that we make right now to build the infrastructure that will let us have infinite energy as long as the wind blows when the oil runs out?
To follow up his question, I mean, there are decisions that potentially are intergenerational decisions, and involve generational justice. And it does seem a lot to ask of someone to act against their self-interest and in favor of the interests of people that may live 80 or 100 years from now. Is there any way sort of economically you can build in the cost of certain decisions so that when you drive a car, you actually are paying the real price for how that impacts the environment?
If we, for example, paid the full life cycle cost of coal, for example, it's tough to have, say, solar electricity at 35 cents a kilowatt hour compete against 7 cents a kilowatt hour for coal, partly because we're not costing the loss of rivers, the loss of mountains, the loss of culture that's also occurring as a result of flattening those mountains. If we somehow were able to help people understand the true cost, it's like the price of a gallon of gasoline that we pay at the pump is not the real price.
Yeah, and the only thing I was just going to, I just do think we're incredibly short-term in our thinking, and I don't know how we shift that. And maybe it's because we're still a new country and we just don't think as long-term as civilizations that have been around longer, who do think in longer interest, in a longer interest sense. And everybody will famously give the Chinese as an example of a civilization that really does think very long term. We just don't. And I think incentives are one thing, but most people really don't believe, I mean, as much as you show and others show slideshows like that it really is going to happen.